Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining the Surrey Board of Trade. I'm Anita Huberman. I'm CEO of Surrey's City Building Business Organization. And certainly the topic that you're about to hear is a very close one to the Surrey Board of Trade. We were the first business organization in British Columbia that really did some significant policy work to make sure that caregiving, childcare, how you balance your family with your workplace, running your business, all of those supports that were needed by government was front and center. We made it a business issue. And so very shortly, I'm going to introduce your speakers. But I just wanted to start off by saying that the Surrey Board of Trade is here for you. We are one of the 10 largest chambers of commerce boards of trades in Canada. And there's 450 of us in our country. And most recently, we received BC government funding to form a rapid response business center, to have a pandemic playbook, the only one of its kind that's about to be produced by the end of this month, and an on-the-ground center that is going to help business with reskilling, being that concierge of connections, and being a better support to you in terms of government connections. That is the value proposition that the Surrey Board of Trade brings to our members, to our stakeholders, and to our city. Surrey is going to be the largest city in British Columbia very soon. A third of our population is under the age of 19. And so when we're talking about today's topic, I want you to think about in the back of your mind how the Surrey Board of Trade Rapid Response Business Center can help you. We're here for you. Please don't hesitate to contact us for anything that you may need. So businessinsurrey.com, or my email address is anita@businessinsurrey.com. So as I mentioned, today's topic is going to be very instrumental in terms of how we move the economy. And so you figured out how to get your business through the last 4 months, but not without consequence. And really, to be successful into the future, you need your staff healthy and well. And on top of having to pivot and change how work gets done, family caregiving pressures, not only childcare, but parents and elderly parents are really present that challenging situation. So that work-life balance stress, the caregiving roles, being productive at work and at home can really take a toll on you and those around you. So I'm very pleased to welcome to the Surrey Board of Trade this morning for this next hour as we hear some tips and resources that can help you maintain this balance. So I'm going to turn it over to Stephanie Chan. She's founder of myCarebase Solutions, and Candace Giesbrecht, human resources and remote leader coach and consultant. And they're going to teach you strategies and best practices that will help your staff and you balance caregiving and work. Stephanie and Candace, over to you.
Thank you so much, Anita. Candace and I are so happy to be here. And just as someone could nod if they can hear me okay, is my sound okay? And is the screen shared? Can everyone see the slides? Yeah, great. So what we'll do today is we'll start off with just a little introduction. Candace and I will just introduce ourselves, give you a sense of our backgrounds, and then we'll go over the agenda for today, and then we'll launch right into the presentation. I'll introduce myself and I'll hand it over to Candace. I've been in senior living for about the last 13 years. Prior to that, I used to practice law for another 10 years, and I decided to quit cold turkey to start a business. And about 13 years ago, I started my first business called Home to Home, and it still exists. And what we do there is we do healthcare advocacy. We help families navigate the private and public healthcare systems. in particular with respect to senior care and senior housing. We help people with downsizing and estate support. And then a couple of years ago, I started my second company, which is this company, myCarebase, which is all aimed at helping seniors stay at home and helping family caregivers support their elders in living independently at home so that they don't have to move to an assisted living or care residence. And here we've built an online senior living hub that has resources and services in a managed, curated manner so that families feel like they're getting advice and trusted content and trusted vendors. With that, Candace, over to you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having Stephanie and I to talk about this topic. As I was preparing, just coming on the line chatting with Heather, the issue today wasn't coming up with what to talk about, but where do we limit the conversation for this hour? And so we trust that as we've done our best to bring some of our best thoughts and best practices, that it will be helpful for you. But both Stephanie and I would love to hear from you afterwards. If there's a piece that you wish that we had or could dig into more, we would be more than happy to do that. And in fact, it would be an absolute pleasure. As an HR consultant, I help businesses with their people and with their people strategies. And over the last year, I had the privilege of coming alongside of a few remote work researchers. And who knew that a year ago, as I was digging into this topic of remote leadership and remote workers, that it would become as relevant as it is. So I'm no smarter than anybody else in the room. I know there's a ton of wisdom and a ton of experience in this, just present here on this call. But I had a little bit of a head start just in digging into the actual research of it, and it's our pleasure today to introduce you to some of that.
So the purpose of today's discussions, we have three major goals. The first is to have a better understanding of what caregiving means. What is your workforce facing outside of the workplace? What are some of the pressure points, and what are the roles and responsibilities that they take on outside the workplace? And then we're going to talk about the role and responsibilities and the duties of employers to support those employees. And lastly, we'll explore some real case solutions that companies are doing right here in Metro Vancouver to help their workforce, and hopefully spark some ideas about things and initiatives that you can maybe initiate in your company. Okay.
So just as we're getting started, I know a common question with presentations is, will you be sharing the slides? And we are more than happy to share the slides, but Stephanie and I are also going to keep track of whatever questions come up during the session. And please, we want to allow a little bit of time for Q&A at the end. Just pop your questions into the chat. And Heather and the team at the Surrey Board of Trade are going to monitor that. And then when it comes time for our Q&A, then we can hop into those questions. And as we're bundling the slides to send to you afterwards, if there was a topic that it sounded like you wanted to know more about, then we'll include that as well. Okay, over to you, Stephanie.
Okay, thanks. So an employee who is also a caregiver wears many hats, and a caregiver could be taking care of young children at home. That's probably the most common, is to have children who are still living in your household, where you're still managing the household, you're cooking, you're cleaning, you're driving them to school or appointments or activities, maybe less so during these times, but maybe you've been homeschooling them, watching over their homework, etc. And then the typical sandwich generation employee also has elders. And so the meaning of sandwich generation means that you're in the middle and you're being pulled from both sides. You've got responsibilities on both sides of you, minors and elderly parents. So it's not that you're just doing these responsibilities for your family household, you're doing it for your parents. And I've seen many cases where the sandwich generation employee is also doing some of these tasks for their in-laws. And so you've got two sets of parents, you've got four people with very different needs who are aging and require your support. And then you've got any number of children in the household as well. So it can get very, very stressful. Now, in terms of where the biggest pressure points are, in the last 13 years in helping these families, I actually deal just as much with the adult children as I do with the seniors, because the adult children are the powers of attorney. They're the ones who initiate the discussion, and they're the ones that take charge when their parents' lives change and their health evolves. So there are four main categories that I see when dealing with the adult kids who are also working and caregiving at the same time. The first is time management. There's only a certain number of hours in the day. They're working full-time hours, or in many cases, more than full-time. And so they've somehow got to split up their available time outside work between parents, kids, figuring out what school is going to look like in the fall, in-laws, etc. And so there's just not enough hours. And so what a lot of caregivers do, Candace, can you go back, please?
Yeah, sorry.
Sorry. What a lot of caregivers do is they put themselves last. And so I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later on. And because that's not healthy and that's not good in the long term. But time management definitely is one area. Being prepared and knowing where the resources are. In everyone I talk to, whenever I do market research studies or look at other research studies, this is probably one of the top three stresses that I always hear about, is that people don't know where to turn. They don't know where the solutions are. The healthcare system's really fragmented. If you have a sick child or if you have a sick parent, it just adds to the stress. Then there's the emotional element. With kids at home for the last 6 months, and you know, all the activities and sports ceasing, etc. And you know, changes with work and just the whole world has put a lot of emotional stress on everybody. And the sandwich generation employee is no exception. And lastly, finances. There are a lot of out-of-pocket, non-recoverable costs associated with caregiving, both as a parent and as supporting elderly parents. If you look at kind of some studies, just in Canada alone, the value of unpaid caregiving is in the billions in Canada alone. So it's a very unrecognized area of valuable work. So as the employer, if you were to think about what are the programs and the initiatives and things that we could do to support our employees, if you focus on these four categories and see what you can do to support these pressure points, I think you're off to a great start. And at the end of the presentation, we actually have some suggestions on each of these four categories. Okay, next. As an employer and also as the employee who might be going through this, it's important to also recognize the pressure points and the symptoms of when someone might be feeling the stress of caregiving. And why is it important? It's because you've got a duty as an employer to know what's going on in your workforce, and the employers who help their employees will find that their loyalty and morale is increased. They're more productive at work. And so by helping the employees, you're really helping the whole organization as well. So some of the emotional side effects and symptoms, distraction and anxiety, definitely mental health issues such as depression and moodiness, withdrawing from others. Maybe someone is not as social as they used to be at work. And really kind of like a loss of interest because they're so distracted. A very stressed out family caregiver will likely not be getting a full night's sleep. And so they might be experiencing physical symptoms as a result of lack of sleep, poor diet, lack of exercise, and even, maybe some addictions, definitely some changes in physical appearance. And so those are some of the physical warning signs. In terms of the long-term effects, definitely mental health. I think that with the pandemic, that is only bringing to light something that's always existed with the stress of being a caregiver and full-time employee, some of the mental health issues. As I mentioned, lower productivity at work, and the financial strain might emerge in different ways at work if someone is spending out-of-pocket money on caregiving. And finally, I have met many caregivers who have just felt that they can't handle it all. And so they've had to, they've been forced to reduce their hours to part-time, or I've met caregivers who have just quit their careers early in order to support their aging parent and spend the last few years more with them. Okay. To highlight some real life examples, I thought I would just share with you 3 situations that I think are really common in today's world. And maybe some of you on the call now can relate to some of these situations. Long distance caregiver is a really common scenario where as an adult child, you may not live close to your parent. I am not a long distance caregiver. My parents live in Richmond, but I deal with a lot of families where the adult child lives here, but perhaps they grew up in Toronto, they grew up in Edmonton, or Kitimat or Victoria. And so managing that care and monitoring how your parents are doing from afar can be really challenging. You can't see them, and so that creates anxiety. For some, keeping in touch and communicating with an elderly parent can be a challenge as well. Sandwich generation, full-time employee. I want to give you a story of someone I know, and this is kind of the perfect definition of how stressful someone in this situation can be. Someone I know is a teacher. And we know very well that teachers are under pressure these days. She is sandwich generation. Her mother has dementia, still living at home. Her dad is a full-time caregiver to her mom, but her and her sister have to support her mom. She has 2 children in high school, both of whom live at home. So they've been home for the last few months, online learning. And then she herself got diagnosed with cancer during the pandemic. So it's been very stressful. So that is a real life example of pressure points coming every which way in this woman's life. And then I think Candace has a story about a blended family and the caregiving pressures there.
Yeah, so I mean, a good friend of mine. So dad had hip surgery. Husband decided things weren't working out, and so they split. But then in the midst of it all, one of their children was diagnosed with cancer. And so with blended family, as new partners came on the scene, and trying to navigate these worries about dad, and then also worries about a sick kid. And so, I mean, as we were talking about these caregiving stories with intent to sort of, highlight some of the things that might be going on for your employees, we also recognize these are your stories likely. And for all of us, we may be in these situations as well, just compounding the difficulties and the challenges that occur for us, not only as employers, but also as people who may also be in these very scenarios ourselves. And so it's hard enough to just manage our own life. And, I love the title that Stephanie titled this session, Caregiving versus Work. And, it can often feel like a choice. We have to choose between the caregiving pressures and doing the work and just trying to balance and manage it all. And so, you know, we throw around this phrase work-life balance, but what we've seen in the research is that actually this phrase is falling a little bit out of favor because the phrase alone can create stress. There's a sense that work-life balance means I have to balance it all, that somehow, you know, if it's in balance, that it's almost got equal time or equal play. And that's not reality for most of us. And so a preferred phrase that we've started using and through the group of psychologists that I support called Work Evolution. I'll tell you a little bit about them in a minute, but we're preferring either work-life integration, so integrating the two, or work-life wellness. And actually work-life wellness is my preferred phrase because, you know, the goal, I don't know, it seems to add pressure to think about work-life balance. But when we think about wellness in the midst of work and life and recognizing that work is part of life. So that's just a conversation that we could have about this language, but language is powerful. And in the midst of it, what is the employer's responsibility with this anyways? I mean, to a large extent, and certainly historically, when we think about what happens in your personal life, well, that's in your personal life. And historically, it was considered, it was very, it was considered a best practice to not go there with people's lives, and that, you know, their personal life is their personal life. But I think we can all agree that that certainly is not in anyone's best interest these days. And so, so what are the but what is the employer's responsibility? So we want to explore that a little bit. And we would be remiss if we didn't, first of all, look at the legal considerations as an employer. So, so many of you probably know this, and I know there's a couple of HR professionals on the call already, but we have a legal responsibility as employers to ensure a safe and healthy workplace. So most of us are quite familiar with plexiglass and hand sanitizer and sending people home so that they're not exposed, and masks and so on. And so we've all become schooled in providing that physically safe workplace. But we also have a responsibility to ensure a psychologically healthy workplace. And so a workplace that's inclusive, that's free of discrimination, bullying, and harassment. And so what that has to do with this particular conversation is when we consider the stuff that Stephanie was just talking about. So when people are balancing or struggling with balancing their caregiving and their work responsibilities, there's a high likelihood that we're seeing people stretch to the limit with their mental health, that they're not sleeping well, that they're experiencing that list of, was there like 12 or 13 things on there, Stephanie? And that's just the beginning of a list that we think about. And so what happens when people are struggling with their mental health, or, you know, they're experiencing some of those symptoms, then they're likely not bringing their best selves. And so behavior in a workplace can be even more challenging in not just a remote environment because of all of this, but because as a direct cause or a direct impact of the caregiving stresses that they're experiencing. And so you may see employees being short with one another, or you may see employees who are maybe just not themselves. And as we continue, as time plays out, and without attention to what that employee needs in order to be well and in order to have the balance that they need, what can happen is that we start to see some responses within the team. So what happens is Stephanie's short with me, I snap back at her, and then I get fed up with how Stephanie's talking to me. And I'm just picking on you, Stephanie.
Okay.
But this can very quickly escalate to a potential bullying situation, or an experience of being bullied or treated unfairly. And so then I don't want to deal with Stephanie anymore. And so then I start, and you see how the spiral can kind of go. And so it's actually a legal responsibility to ensure and to attend to if you see people's behavior not being completely respectful and gracious. And so attending to people's how people are showing up is not just good business and can be supportive to them, but it could also help to prevent some potential, just worst case scenario, bullying situations. And I know that this is a really big topic, and this is one of those things that if you wanted to chat a little bit more about that, I'm so happy to chat with you afterwards. So, so if you see someone who you believe is struggling with some mental health issues, if you see someone on your team that you think, I had it happen actually with a client the other day. They said to me, I think that person was high on the call, and that we had yesterday, and this isn't the first time. And so, so there is a duty to inquire. If you have concerns that a person is not performing and unwell due to some health concerns, you have a duty to inquire. It's not okay to just look the other way. And then as you dig in, when you inquire, this may result in a duty to accommodate. And so this is also one of those topics that, like, we could do a whole session just on this, but I felt like I would be remiss to not at least mention this topic. And honestly, like, if you don't know about what these mean, then please contact me afterwards, and I'm happy to walk you through. But what are the best practices and the resources and the strategies? And so, you know, I think, Stephanie, like, when I look at that list, I just feel a little overwhelmed when I think about all the people I know, and even myself, like, as I think about, oh, okay, you know what, I maybe need to pay attention to some of these areas that, you know, when these warning lights start to go off on the dashboard of, that we're looking at it on our team. So what are the best practices and the resources and the strategies? And the thing I want to focus on, you know, there's a number of models out there, but as I mentioned just a couple minutes ago, I've had the privilege of coming alongside of some remote work researchers, and their model through their research is just, I find, a really easy one to understand. So the best practices, honestly, it starts with us. It starts with us looking in the mirror and looking at our leadership capabilities. And in the research through Work Evolution, it's really 4 main buckets for you as an employer and as a leader that you can focus on that can make a profound difference in the support of your employees, which ultimately results in productivity, which translates to profit and engagement and so on. And so the first bucket is relationships. I think we can agree, I mean, at least I hope we agree with, I think if you're showing up on this call, chances are you probably already know this, but attending to the relationships that you have with your staff is a critical piece of leading them. And the relationships that we had prior to COVID-19, we may have had the benefit of investing in those relationships and really getting to know some people. But, you know, I had a leader I was talking to who was saying, you know, I feel bad for the guy who started just before COVID-19 because I've got years of relationships with everybody else on the team but that person. And so what am I going to do as a leader to ensure that I'm going that extra mile to try and build that relationship? Because when we're not shoulder to shoulder the way that we were before COVID-19, and everybody, you know, just whatever the response has been for your business, it's incumbent on the leader. It really is, the onus is on you to try and build that relationship with each individual employee. The second piece is flexibility, and we've all been forced to be flexible. So we've figured out, you know what, sometimes employees, they don't have a dedicated home office. Maybe they've got it in, a friend of mine, her desk is set up in her closet. And she's got a fan in there and she's moved the clothes out of the way. And many of us probably have those stories too. I was saying to Stephanie, the same friend, she wakes up at 4 a.m. because that's the only time she can really, like, hammer out her emails and make sure she's prepped for her meetings until the kids are up and she's got to get breakfast and she's got to get other stuff. And then, you know, as I mentioned, dad with the surgery. And so there's all these demands, but as an employer, to be able to be flexible and say, look, here's the deliverables, where and when you can get this part of the work done. Like, let's negotiate what the hours of work are, if it's possible for you to do that, and to be flexible where you can to identify where that is. The next piece here is culture, and culture really means, we're talking about 2 different kinds of culture in this situation and through the research. So the first piece is that workplace culture. So what's it like to what's it like to work at the Surrey Board of Trade? And, you know, how do we do things around here? So that's like the corporate culture. But there's also big C culture. And so when we consider that people may not have all been born in Canada, when we consider that some people may have grown up in downtown Vancouver and others may have grown up in Abbotsford even, like, you know, there's so many pieces that impact a person's sense of how we do things. And so attending to diversity and inclusion and equity and how people feel like they belong it's incumbent on you, and it's a special area of capability that you can develop and invest in. And the fourth piece is productivity. And, you know, it used to be, and it wasn't all that long ago, that many businesses still considered, well, I know they're working because they're sitting in their desk between 8 and 4. Well, were they really? And is that the measure of productivity? Honestly, in this season, this is an opportunity for us as employers to really look at what are we measuring? Is it just attendance and being in a seat, or can we measure productivity in different ways? And so leveraging technology like Trello or Asana, or, you know, if you use Microsoft, using the planner function and so on, these, but just really attending to staff and engaging them in that conversation. How are we going to know that work is being done? What's the most important work to get done? How can we ensure that our meetings are actually productive? And there's a number of strategies that like are super practical that can make a huge difference in the wellness of your staff. So when we consider the leader capabilities, as I mentioned, there's 4 different buckets, but I'm interested, if you just look at this list of the 13 capabilities that the research showed, which of these do you think is actually the most important? I'm just going to give you 1 second to look these over. So if you had to pick, which of these do you think is the most important according to the research? So the one is actually trust. And so if we don't have trust, then people won't access your support. They won't feel like they're unified, or the team won't be unified. If you don't have trust, how is collaboration going to go? When we think about balancing caregiving and life, if they don't trust you and trust that you've got their best interests at heart, then they're not going to disclose to you how stressful things really are. They're not going to be as open to learning or to, and they're not going to be as strong in their communication if there isn't trust. Performance is, if they're living sort of in fear, they're not sure that they've got a trusting relationship with their manager or their employer, they're not going to perform at as high a level. And communication culturally is going to be more of a struggle. And so investing in trust is your best bang for your buck. And so how do we do that? The first one is do it multiple ways. There is no one answer. So you need to do it individually, one-to-one. And so where are the one-to-one opportunities that you have with each of your employees? And as a group, you can check in as well. So, and you can do that formally via surveys, or you can also just say, how's it going? How's everybody feeling? And ask them the questions just outright. But the point is to do it intentionally. And one of the ways you can do that intentionally is to model the way. And one of the ways that we can model the way is not just asking the questions, but going first, saying, you know what, I'm really struggling right now with balancing it all. And how's it going for others? And just finding those ways to kind of do that shoulder to shoulder conversation, and that creating those water cooler moments that would have happened in the old days, 7 months ago. So the other way to build trust is to really attend to employee experience. If you put yourself in the shoes of each of your employees, what is their experience of you as an employer? So how are they getting the support they need? How do they know what's being expected of them? How many meetings are you making them show up to? Do they have an option to do things in different ways? And so asking and attending to how is it going for you is probably one of the most critical ways that you can build trust. Over to you, Stephanie.
Okay. In preparation for this webinar, I actually did a very informal market survey, and I'm going to be going over some real life situations and what companies are doing to help their employees as a result of COVID. I specifically fashioned the survey to be about what new initiatives has the company put in place since COVID. Many people in the room are very knowledgeable about traditional best practices and benefits. Before I get into each one, I want to have an overall kind of, I want to put an overall statement out there that family caregivers tend to put themselves last, whether you're taking care of children at home or caring for aging parents. It's just a natural element of being a caregiver. Once you get into that mindset, you tend to put yourself last. So my message out to employers is it would be nice if you could create an environment where they feel like they're being put first, because outside of the workplace, they are themselves putting themselves last. A lot of the families I deal with where I see a sandwich generation full-time employee, they go to work as a break from caregiving. So if you've been a full-time parent and you're transitioning back to work, they look forward to that adult interaction. They look forward to an environment where they don't have to do caregiving, they can get a break, they can work towards accomplishments that are solely their own and maybe use different aspects of their brain. So with that, I'm going to go over some of the specific solutions with the companies that I canvassed in preparation for this webinar. Almost every company I've talked to is implementing some sort of flex in the hours, the days, and the job position duties of their workforce to accommodate some of these pressures that the employees are experiencing outside the workplace. So if you have kids at home and you need to you know, as Candace mentioned in the other example, start at 4 a.m., fine. I think most employers just feel like as long as you can get the job done, you manage your own time. So I thought that was good. And that's probably the most common thing I heard across the board. Next, paid or unpaid family time off. I saw different responses in terms of, oh, can you go back, Candace? Thanks. I saw different responses from companies in terms of allowing for family time, the increase in family days, or allowing people to have unpaid time off. One company I talked to changed their vacation policy. So many companies have a kind of a use it or lose it policy when it comes to vacation, because if you let everybody roll over the vacation, it increases the liability on their books. But in recognition that really no one's taking a lot of vacation this year, they changed their vacation policy to allow everyone to roll over their vacation time, which I thought was nice. Some companies started employee support groups, so COVID response support groups. And then in terms of some other world events that happened, support groups for people of color, LGBTQ groups, and so forth. So these support groups are started by employees, facilitated by employees, and for employees. And they meet on a regular basis. So those peer support groups I felt were a good idea as well. Everybody has expanded their wellness program in some way, shape, or form. And so those wellness programs can occur in conjunction with your EAP program, or it can be outside of your EAP program. So within your EAP program, you may want to talk to your benefits providers about setting up a healthcare spending account or a personal spending account. And that gives employees an allowance to spend with a healthcare spending account. It's a limited type of expense that can go in there. But with personal spending accounts, they can spend that on anything. And that's just in recognition that there are some pressures and out-of-pocket costs associated with what's been going on in the world lately. Some things that they're doing outside of an EAP program is just having more speakers come in. So webinars like this, lunch hour speakers to come speak on things like mental health, resiliency, personal development, career development, things like that. just to better support their employees. So this kind of replaces the traditional brown bag lunch meetings. Many employers have set up resource portals. So if you have an intranet, a resource page, and that resource page can have different categories. So you can have COVID support resources. You can have family caregiving resources. And if anyone wants to set this up, I can help them with respect to caregiving resources. Next, employee hardship fund. So this was not that common, but it was unique. So I wanted to put this on here. A couple of companies in the city have, that I know of, have set up hardship funds to help employees who, for whatever reason, maybe even though they didn't lose their job with you, maybe their spouse lost their job and they're having a hard time managing their mortgage. Maybe their child was diagnosed with cancer. And for whatever reason, so the employee would apply for this fund and get some extra funds to kind of finance this bridge period of hardship. One company I spoke with also, I found this very forward thinking, had a partner or vendor support fund. So in addition to helping their employees, they recognize that they can't have all their vendors go out of business, because if their vendors go out of the business, they're going to be hooped in the long term as well. And so they created a limited vendor support fund where vendors, you know, the small businesses that support this company could also apply for some funding as well so that they could stay in business. And I thought that was so innovative and forward thinking. Some companies are providing a home office allowance. So this is in recognition that not everyone has an extra room in their house that is set up as a home office. Some people don't even have a desk or a strong enough internet connection to do these Zoom calls. And so the home office allowance, in the cases I've heard, most commonly would cover internet and would cover, in some cases, purchase of a desk, a chair, just some modest office furniture so that they can remain productive at home. Finally, a law firm that responded to the survey said that they were giving, so you know, accounting firms and law firms, they live on billable hour targets among all their partners and associates. So what they did was they gave everyone a billable hour credit to recognize that people were spending more time at home, needing to attend to their kids or aging parents. And they gave everyone a really generous caregiving credit in terms of billable hour credit. So in terms of best practice solutions, oh, sorry, next one, next slide. Thanks. So as an employee, so the last slide was as an employer, what can you do to help your employees? And this slide is, if you're the employee, what are some tactics, resources, tips to help you manage your own stress? This is, you know, based on my experience in dealing with family caregivers. The first is, don't try to take on everything yourself. Don't feel like you have to do everything. And again, it's human nature for family caregivers to take on the whole burden, put themselves last, which is not healthy in the long term for anybody. So think about expanding your support team. Who is in your support team? And can you include other people? Can you ask a sibling to take your mom to the doctor? Can you ask a neighbor to take care of your child for an afternoon? So expand that support team, ask professionals for help. So that could be medical professionals. It could be talking to your financial advisor about freeing up some of your cash flow to hire more help. It could be talking to people like me around solutions for aging parents so that you don't have to do the research yourself. And think about getting some respite care so that you can get a break from caregiving, whether it's parental caregiving or taking care of an aging parent. You need a break to focus on yourself. So getting that support to fill in for you, where it could be a spouse, it could be an aunt, friend, whatever, or hired help, maybe hiring a cleaner, a nanny, a caregiver for your parent. will really go a long way in alleviating your own stress. Being prepared can also eliminate a panic situation. So in the limited time that you have, if you research and plan for contingencies and be prepared for when something unexpected happens, then you will help yourself avoid a crisis in the future. Of course, focus on yourself. Make sure you get regular sleep, a good diet, exercise, and continue doing the things that you've always had joy in doing. You need to create endorphins, and you know, of the top 3 things that create endorphins, I think everyone knows that exercise creates endorphins, but also laughter does. And so doing the things that you love, whether it's a hobby or socializing with others, is important. And then lastly, relaxation techniques, of course, and everyone has to experiment with what works for them. For me, I just started meditation this year, and I have a certain practice of meditation that works for me. A lot of people I know do yoga. Yoga doesn't work for me. So you really have to experiment and see what works best for you. Okay. And with that, we have a little bit of time. We wanted to make sure to leave time for questions. Maybe Candice, we should tell them what our offer is. Should we do that?
Yeah, you bet. Go ahead, Stephanie. You start.
So Candace and I wanted to leave you all with something of value for attending this webinar. In addition to sending everyone a copy of the slides, what I'd like to offer is if any of you in your workplace are interested in a lunch hour webinar where you feel like you want to bring in a speaker to help your employee workforce through caregiving issues, I would love to do that. It's something that I normally do. And I'd be willing to, for today's attendees, give 50% off my regular fee. It's not expensive to start off with, but I'll give 50% off for that lunch hour webinar. And what I do in those lunch hour webinars for workplaces, I've done many of them, is I really focus on developing a roadmap for the employees in terms of the typical issues they face in caregiving. I didn't have enough time today to go through the resources, the planning issues, and the solutions for, you know, your personal situation. So I'd be happy to do that to go into your workplace and create a special webinar for your workforce.
And for me, I would, I just recognize that there's a number of things that I may have touched on, whether it's remote leader capabilities or some of the challenges that can come with navigating what your employees are showing up with. And so for any attendees here, if I wanted to offer a half hour of my time, just to have a quick talent strategy brainstorm or coaching session. So our emails are on the slide here, and we're happy to follow up with you. So are there any questions? Heather, I'm having trouble seeing the chat.
It doesn't look like there are any questions right now. So with that, I think we'll end here. Oh, we do have one question come in. We are on the employee side. How can we have our employee or management side see this presentation? So I guess I will answer that for you, actually. We'll be sending out the recording after it's processed today, along with the slides and the presenter's contact information for everyone to follow up with. Are there any other questions? Well, seeing none, I think we'll end here then. Thank you both for joining us today, and thank everyone.
More, actually.
Oh,
there's one last one.
Okay, this is a big one. So, Candace, could you speak a bit more to the updates to the BC Employment Standards Act and how that affects this side? So, what does this side mean? Is that the employers? So maybe we could follow up with the COVID-19 and the employment relationship. So I think that's actually a bigger topic that I'm able to cover in this amount of time. Maybe that I would recommend having someone from Employment Standards to come on that topic. And I hope that all of you are subscribing to some of the bulletins that are available. And what I'll do in the follow-up is I'll make sure that I provide that we provide a link so that employers, so that you can have, you know, just sort of access to the most up-to-date information.
Okay, well, thank you both for joining us today. If anyone does have any questions, we will be sending out both Candace and Stephanie's contact information so you can reach out to them directly. And otherwise, make it a great business day.